This video will provide you with valuable information regarding how to market effectively and bring in new business as an attorney at Godfrey Johnson. Our system of marketing is referred to as the IPAP CD method. This training video will explain how that method operates and how it should keep you on track to becoming truly effective as a rainmaker in the firm. One of the most important factors behind any project or plan is not only to desire an outcome, but to take action. Only actions produce results. All else is wishful thinking and chaos. This program will teach you how to convert your plans into actions and from actions to derive results. The core of the IPAP CD system is to document every step. IPAP CD stands for Identify, Plan, Approach, Propose, and Confirm. Each of those phases is documented, and the documentation drives your thinking and your actions as you move through the cycle of action. So first, let's discuss what that cycle of action consists of. The first step is to identify who it is you're going to try to market. Once you understand who that is, and we're talking at this stage not just about general industries or even corporations, but specific people within corporations such as insurance companies or corporate parties that we would like to represent. Once that identification has been made, your next step is to formulate a plan for how to approach that person in order to make yourself known and develop a productive relationship that leads to incoming business. Then, once you've got the plan complete, you make the approach. We'll provide you with concrete, specific tools on how to do that. Once you've made the approach and you have communication established with a prospective client, the next step is to develop a conversational framework that leads to you making a proposal for work that you can do for that person or his employer. Once the proposal is accepted, you confirm that that proposal's been accepted and thereby formalize the existence of an attorney-client relationship. And through the completion of this cycle that you see on the screen before you right now, you see that we have the basic formula for how to attract new business into the firm. What we need to do now is break down each of these 5 parts and put them into concrete terms that are easy to carry out. Now, the documentation phase is done through daylight. It is the central clearinghouse of all marketing information. So let's go back to the documentation and identification stage. This can be done in a number of different ways, and we'll cover that because this is usually the hardest first step for new lawyers that have just become marketers. We identify by criteria initially. For example, are we talking about marketing an insurance company? Are we talking about marketing a direct corporate client? Are we talking about trying to market in bulk to an entire industry? We have to make those decisions first. Then we identify by specific people. We begin with corporate entities such as insurers and corporations. And then once we have those listed, we find out who the proper parties are, who the specific people, the specific individuals within that corporation we need to talk to in order to make ourselves known. We then apply the non-existence formula. The non-existence formula is a very useful overall approach to how to deal with improving a situation between yourself and another party, whether it's a company or a business or a person, when they have no idea who you are. This is the basic nuts and bolts of how to get out of a condition of non-existence with respect to a potential marketing prospect, someone you'd like to have as a client. 1, you've got to get communication established with that party. Establishing communication is more a blunt force issue than any kind of delicate operation. You just make yourself known by picking up the phone or walking up to somebody in person. There are a few other ways to do that involving social media and email, but the best introductory forms of communication are by telephone and live contact. Second step is, once you're in communication with that party, use that communication line to find out what is needed or wanted. Find out what kind of legal work they need. Find out what kind of legal work they routinely hire lawyers to perform. Find out what they're happy or unhappy with when it comes to their existing counsel. From that, you can establish in your own mind what is needed or wanted, and from that you can go forward to find a way to do, produce, or deliver that thing. Once you've gotten that far, You're out of non-existence, and you just need to maintain the relationship by continuing to develop a two-way exchange of value. Good legal services for fees paid. That's the formula for getting out of non-existence once you've identified your contact. Another way to identify who you're going to approach is by industry. You could start to focus on specific legal industries: nursing home litigation, aviation cases, construction defect cases, legal malpractice defense or plaintiff, employment cases, and it goes on and on. We could talk about medical products liability, insurance bad faith, and so forth. The general industries in which we are most experienced are found easily on the law firm website under the heading Practice. You can also identify clients by referral. You can ask current clients for help identifying others that they know who might profit from our services. You can ask other lawyers for suggestions and help. You can ask trade association personnel for opportunities to speak, or you can just show up at a trade association meeting or convention. The most effective way to meet new clients is public speaking. We'll talk more about that later. You can also identify a client or a potential client by history. If you look in Daylight Contacts, you'll find companies, you'll find individuals, and you can use filters to figure out who it is that you should be talking to. You can look up by category, you can look up by case name, you can look up by case type, you can look up by a number of other filter factors that are used in Daylight. It's beyond the scope of this training video to teach you to use Daylight, but there are an infinite number of ways that you can filter specific groups out of the 9,000 or so contacts that we have gathered in Daylight over the last 20 years. We have found that you can develop thousands of contacts in a few days with just LinkedIn. Then you decide, what do I do next? When it comes to that specific individual, that leads us to stage 2 of the IPAP CD program, which is planning. So let's talk about how we would do the planning. The first thing we need to do is obtain information about that individual that we're going to open a comm line with. And that information that we're going to try to find out is frequently available online, frequently available through Google or social media. Who is the right person in the company that I should be talking to? Once I know that, I need to know what their job position is, what their role in the organization is, what's their title, what are their day-to-day obligations, and how do they interact with counsel? Where do they physically work? We've already identified who their employer is, but we need to know where they operate. Is it here in town? Is it someone that we would have to get on a plane to go see? We just need to know these things. Then we need to know who they currently use as legal counsel. That will tell us a lot about what their expectations and litigation experience and history is, because if they're using firms that we know something about, we might be able to presage or speculate in advance about the kinds of problems they've had, because we've learned over time that some law firms are notoriously bad at certain things. That gives us a point of leverage or a point of entrance into the relationship. We want to know who else they work with within their company. Do they answer directly to the president? Are they in charge of an entire team of adjusters? Do they work directly with general counsel? Are they general counsel? We need to know how they're situated within the company. We need to know what sorts of legal matters that they are dealing with. Are they employment cases? Are they product liability claims? Are they procuring insurance coverage and forwarding claims to a third-party administrator? What sort of actual nuts and bolts work do they have on their desk when it comes to litigation? Once you know these things and other items that you could think up on your own, you decide the best course of action. Once you've figured that out, it's time to make the approach. And making the approach is where people break down because they have a fear of rejection. We'll talk more later about how to avoid that fear of rejection, or at least how to keep it from becoming a barrier that you have to overcome in order to become an effective rainmaker. Basically, it's going to come down to this one thing. You just need to make the phone call. It's normally going to be a phone call, unless you walk up to somebody at a convention, or you walk up to somebody after a seminar, or they walk up to you after you've given a seminar. 95% of the time, your initial contact with a potential marketing client is going to be you picking up the phone and making a call to that person. And it's going to be a cold call a lot of the time, unless you've previously established some level of communication through social media or through some other avenue, such as email. You have to picture how easy this is going to be. Most insurance claims adjusters, if we take the example of marketing new insurance business, are overworked and burned out. They're bored, they're tired of their job, and there's a daily monotony that they would do just about anything to get away from. The things you have to offer for them are free food, luxury dining, entertainment, companionship, friendship, and specific magic tools concerning how to deal with an opposing attorney who's constantly annoying them or throwing things at them that they don't understand or harassing them. You have solutions for all these things. You represent a better life for these people, and they know that when you call them. So that's why when you make that call, odds are good that you'll be received warmly, unless you happen to hit somebody at just the wrong time. Better than claims adjusters are corporate general counsel. They're harder to get on the phone. They're harder to get attention from, but they are a much riper form of business contact because corporate work typically bills out at about twice the hourly rate that you can bill on an insurance claim. Once we've documented how we plan to approach the contact that we've identified, and we make the call, we need to know what we're going to say. Suggest coffee, lunch, dinner, a game of golf, going to a sporting event, or even a movie. You can offer free, valuable seminars, which we have many in stock to give. You just need to make sure you know which ones we have available. You can offer other services. You can be very imaginative, but you've got to be sensible and make sure that you're not committing yourself to tons of free work. But you, at all costs, need to get an in-person meeting opportunity with that individual unless they're sending you work solely based on telephonic or electronic communication. Nothing will build a rapport better than an in-person meeting. It's the in-person meetings that are more relaxed, they're less time pressured, and it's in those contexts that you can do a better job of learning what's needed and wanted and so on so that you can apply the non-existence formula. Now, as I mentioned earlier, speeches and presentations are a fast way to become known to large numbers of potential clients. They turbocharge any mingling you would do at a convention. So for example, if you go to a convention of aviation professionals that consists largely of insurance claims adjusters who handle air crashes, you could mingle and you can hand out business cards. But if at the beginning of that conference or convention you've given a stellar presentation that becomes a real attention getter, all the mingling you do at that convention for the rest of the time you're there will be completely turbocharged because everyone's going to remember and they'll treat you like a celebrity if the seminar was really good. So this is a super powerful tool to use. Godfrey's first law of marketing is that speeches and presentations are the top of the line item when it comes to turbocharging your marketing. Our second law is that superlative, which means perfect, legal work leads to repeat business and referrals from happy customers. Godfrey's third law of marketing is simply this. Fear of failure is the major reason lawyers do not market effectively. Fear of failure is a barrier that holds them back. The two things that operate in conjunction in the shadow of fear of failure are not properly setting aside time to do the work for marketing, to follow the IPAP CD methodology. It's always easier to put that off and just handle the fires that are starting in your cases. But you've got to schedule and budget time. And you've got to not let the fear of failure force you into a procrastination mode. The other aspect is failure to be organized and failure to remember where you left off with a client, and that's tied to the documentation. So those are other barriers, but they both sit behind fear of failure, and they're both tied to fear of failure. So the answer to this is suck it up and be brave. Recognize that you feel the fear. Recognize that it's not going to hurt you. Recognize that it's just a feeling that will pass. And do not, under any circumstances, let it control how you schedule your time, how you budget your marketing energies, and what you do to make yourself successful. Godfrey's fourth law of marketing, failure to follow up, is the most common reason lawyers lose contact with either once loyal clients or promising prospects. If your competition has been in touch with your client more recently than you have, your relationship with that client is at risk no matter how strong it is. On a given moment, a client has a snap judgment on who to call when they decide to call an attorney. A new suit comes in, they have a reason to make a phone call to a lawyer on a new matter, and they make an instantaneous snap judgment. And if the last person that they spoke to about legal services made them feel good, that's who they're going to call typically. And if that wasn't you, you've lost a relationship. Somebody has wedged their way in. The easiest clients to market are existing or previous clients. That's Godfrey's fifth law of marketing. And the reason it's true is that you are not starting in a condition of non-existence. You are usually well ahead of the game. You're simply resuscitating or rejuvenating an existing relationship. So you don't have to travel as far, so to speak, in order to get to the destination you want, which is to have an ongoing commercial exchange of business with a business source. What's your source of power as a lawyer? What's your source of power as a rainmaker, as a marketer? Where's your energy coming from? One idea leads to another, leads to another, leads to another. But what's driving that progression? Is it because you're particularly good at giving seminars? Is it because you're particularly good at making people feel comfortable over a glass of scotch or a beer talking about sports? Is it because you're very good at getting people to talk about themselves, and people love to talk about themselves? Whatever it is, you need to begin to specifically identify that strength, that source of power, and begin to develop tools to strengthen that source of power. It has been proven time and again that all forms of personal improvement, all quests for self-betterment are much, much more effective when they're made formalized and made real by documentation, typically in the form of journaling. But because this is an organized business activity, we need to do it in a central knowledge repository in a structured way, and for that we use Daylight. In a separate training video, we'll show you specifically how to use the opportunities side of projects in Daylight to keep track of all 5 stages of the IPAP CD methodology. We use the GTD, or Getting Things Done model of workflow management, both to handle our cases in the firm and to handle our marketing projects. We use Daylight to track all of that because Daylight was designed to service the GTD approach, which is Getting Things Done by David Allen. We use Daylight to track and perform our tasks and to log our communications and link our information to an ongoing marketing project. Your brain is for having ideas. It's not for keeping track of them. Computers are for keeping track of them, and that's why GTD is so important, and that's why Daylight is so useful for GTD operations. This is the basic flowchart for getting things done. You can find this on gojosecure.com, and there are several useful outlines as well as a complete copy of the Getting Things Done book by David Allen and some videos that explain this process in greater detail. So let's put this all together. How can we make these principles less theoretical and more practical? Well, let's start with a model routine that you could adopt and make part of your life. It's a twice weekly routine. You budget 30 minutes a day for 2 days of the week identifying client contact personnel that you can approach, starting with industries, corporations, insurers, trade associations, company prospects, general counsel, and even identifying sources of speaking opportunities, which again ties back to trade associations and conventions, and the individual people that you need to talk to about getting business, getting speaking opportunities, getting referrals. So 30 minutes in the morning, twice a week, just identifying these individuals and logging who they are. And then, once you've done that, gathering information about those people from online sources, social media, Google, and so forth. Then, planning how to make the call. Now remember, we don't need to over-plan on this. Too long of a runway can become a barrier. Sometimes you just need to jump into the air and fly. And sometimes you just pick up the phone and you follow the protocol listed in a previous slide. You suggest coffee, lunch, dinner, booze, sporting events, theater, golf game. You're just calling them up to say, hey, can I come and get to know you? And if you spend 30 minutes a day, twice a week, in these activities that you see listed on the screen, you're likely to find that after a few weeks, a few months at the outside, you will have developed a substantial book of new business. And remember, other than the identifying and the planning and the gathering of information, what you're trying to do is make appointments, or at least record information about that individual so that you can set follow-up reminder tasks where a viable situation exists, and it's just going to take some persistence to turn it into real business, which is normal, by the way. That is typically how things go. Let's talk about a psychological and physical principle of the world, which is the value of leverage, and in particular, the leverage value of gradients. If you had to jump over this wall, you could take a hard run at the wall, and you might just crush yourself when you hit it because it's too steep a gradient. So you have to give yourself an ability to take things a step at a time. One of the most famous forms of lever that exists in physics is a wedge. It's a ramp. It's a gradient. If you have to get to the top of that wall, this ramp will make it a lot easier. And what that really boils down to is simply taking things a step at a time and being persistent. If you slide back down the ramp, you get up and you take another run at it. But this is where the IPAP CD system really shines, because it shows us how to take that wall and break it down into a series of steps that can be handled on a gradient to get you to the top of what looks like a hard barrier. That barrier is mostly psychological, so keep this in mind. If you visualize your journey up that ramp, it's easier to think that you'll make it. So here is a sample progression that I'd like you to visualize. You identify the person. You've already figured out which industry, which company. You're all the way down to the individual person now. You know who it is you need to call. Jane Doe is the head of claims at Stonewall Insurance Company, and you need to call her and suggest either a lunch, a dinner, a drink, a cup of coffee, or better yet, a free seminar on closed head injury litigation, bad faith litigation, damage multiplier litigation. The list of seminars is elsewhere available on GOJOsecure.com. You call the person. You figured out who she is, you've learned about her, you got her phone number, you summon your courage, tamp down your fear, you pick up the phone and you call her. You make your suggestion for lunch, and the person agrees. I'd love to have lunch with you. You pick a date, and you go pick her up. You take that person to lunch, and you build a rapport. And by the way, she might bring 2 of her colleagues along, which suddenly turns the marketing power of that lunch up a notch. You find out what that person and or his or her employer need. You offer a seminar on that subject that they need help with, or some other help. Maybe you offer to look over a few files for them. And lo and behold, your offer is accepted. This is the proposal stage of the IPAP CD. You've made a proposal and your offer is accepted, and you document that that has happened and your relationship has now led to actual assignment of work to you. And you now have a new client and new business, and all you need to do is stay in contact. Don't let that relationship lay fallow. Don't let it go stale, and do nothing but perfect legal work for that client. Your reputation as a lawyer will grow, your book of business will grow, and your income will grow. You just have to visualize it actually happening, and you have to be willing to encounter rejection along the way. Winston Churchill once said that his definition of success was akin to failure after failure after failure and never losing your enthusiasm. Persistence is the key. So we start by documenting our identification of client contact individuals, planning, getting intelligence about them, deciding what it is that we're going to say when we call them, making that call, approaching them by jamming that comm line in and suggesting further interactions in the form of entertainment, lunch, seminars, in-office meetings, coffee, anything you can get. And then once you've got that comm line in place, at the proper time, you propose that you could do some work for them. Or if you're lucky, they'll propose that they could hire you to do that work. But at that moment, you've nearly closed the deal. You just need to confirm that you're now their lawyer on a specific matter, follow the rules of ethics, and do good legal work. That turns this cycle of action into the fruit you need to become a rainmaker. Thank you for watching.